Today we're going to talk about some teeth. So I did recently make a screening tool called Airway-aware. I will put a link to that below. And if you're antsy to get a copy and download a copy so you can use that as your own screening tool to check on your own child, go for it. Otherwise, I'm going to just share some information here with some photos. These are just mostly stock photos that show things that we can look for when we're trying to determine, based on the teeth, is growth on track. So let's dive in. A lot of times when I talk about children's development, I want to make sure that it's clear. I'm not suggesting that if their teeth or face is developing a certain way that they can't be successful, that they can't be beautiful. They will be successful and beautiful, but the reality is a lot of the people who do have their teeth or jaws grow a certain way, it's an indication that their body is going to have some functional issues. And I'm using Michael Phelps here as an example. He was obviously a very successful human. And at the same time, he's been very vocal about a lot of the mental health issues that he has personally faced. And so I put in red here, these are some of the things that are common symptoms or diagnoses that can be associated with if the jaws don't grow properly, if there are issues with breathing, sleep, otherwise, as a result of all of that, then these are some of the things that an adult will be up against. We're using the teeth as a reflection of jaw growth. The roof of the mouth is the floor of the nose. And so a lot of times the functions just go hand in hand. When we see that the teeth aren't developing right, we have a hint that maybe breathing isn't going to be happening the way that it should. These are some more like textbook examples of what good spacing looks like and good development. So when children are younger, they actually should have a good amount of space between their baby teeth. And we'll talk about that and why that is. But this is just to make a distinction here. Baby teeth are going to be smaller and they're going to have more space between them. They will be kind of whiter or brighter. That's a question that comes up a lot because there's different compositions of the minerals in the tooth structure from a baby tooth to an adult tooth. And the baby teeth are going to be a little bit flatter. Another thing that comes up in the middle, I circled those little ridges on the teeth. Those are called mamelons, and those are common to adult teeth, at least adult teeth starting out. You may notice that they disappear over time on some adult teeth. If someone's clenching or grinding their teeth or wearing them down, then they'll disappear. But when they first come in, it's very common to see those and nothing to be worried about. When we do have wear, on the other hand, we're going to see flattening. We may see more yellow on the inside surface of some of the teeth. This photo up top is from one of my mentors, Dr. Kevin Boyd, showing both wear from mechanical grinding, but also we likely have a sort of acidic erosion component here as well. That can go hand in hand. A lot of times if there's a functional issue, then there may be some acid reflux or other things going on that are wearing down the tooth structure. So the bottom photo here, even though everything's nice and white, you can see a flattening out of some of the tooth structure there that indicates that wear. So all these kids look pretty good. I just wanted to include some examples to start with. These are all baby teeth. They've got good spacing. Everything's looking so far so good. Transition times make it tricky when we're missing some of those teeth, and obviously it's a hard time to know if the spacing is right or not. So give yourself some grace if you're trying to evaluate your own child and they're missing some of their teeth. But you can still sort of tell if there's some flattening of the teeth, if there's some crowding of the teeth, if we have kind of a more gummy smile. These are some of the features we're going to look at, but just to give yourself grace if they're in a transition time moving from baby teeth to adult teeth. So I did say we would return to this concept. Part of why we have spaces between the baby teeth is because the adult teeth, when they come in, they are bigger than the baby teeth. And so they dissolve away the baby tooth in front of it, and they push through and they come out and they take up more space. So initially, you might still have some gaps in space in there because you have a combination of some baby teeth and some adult teeth. But over time, when all the adult teeth push through, what happens is a lot of times they end up that force of the adult tooth being bigger, they push together. So you can just see sort of maybe some transition time spacing and then that evening out. And these are some examples of adult teeth once the spacing is gone. Some of it treated by braces, hard to say, but just for comparison purposes. And I did want to point out too, just in terms of the spacing, if you do notice a more exaggerated space between the two front teeth, that could be a hint of something called a lip frenum, a tight lip frenum, and may warrant further investigation. Not automatically a functional issue that needs to be addressed, but just a clue that we're looking at. These kiddos are missing space between their teeth. So at first glance, there's nothing majorly off, but we know that they're already missing some space. Two of these mouths have all baby teeth. One has some adult teeth coming in, but we want to see space. And so this is something where it gives me a light bulb moment to say, should we look at symptoms? How is this child breathing? Are they snoring? What other things are going on as to indicate whether or not we need to intervene? So that's just what this is talking about here. This photo I sourced from my niece. When she was 4 years old, she had an absence of spacing between her baby teeth. And I pointed this out to her mom and dad. And she was having at the time some symptoms, a lot of digestive symptoms and some allergies and some hyperactivity. And so they went ahead and pursued some expander treatments. And a lot of the allergies and the digestive issues got better. So it's not always a guarantee that they go hand in hand, but it is something to consider is we're not just looking at the teeth. We want to also be addressing symptoms, but that's not the point of today's video, so I won't spend too much time on that. Again, going back to those adult teeth coming in and taking up more space, these are examples of what we would refer to as like shark teeth, because the adult tooth that's coming in is either sort of off track from dissolving up the baby tooth and coming into a different position, or there's just not space for it. It may be a combination of both. It may be off track because there isn't enough space. So that is another warning sign that we're looking for when we look inside our kids' mouths. Sometimes it's just looking at kind of how the top and bottom teeth come together. This is obviously an exaggeration here with this camel, but it is something that sometimes you can notice is kind of a deviation of the midlines from the top, between the top two teeth and the bottom two teeth, the central ones, and seeing how they line up from top to bottom. That may be another clue that we're looking for. So if you notice that your child's midline's off, it's definitely worth asking your dentist about. And these are some other examples of some things that we're looking at. I would generally say we have some gummy smiles here. Some of them are more crowded, some of them aren't so crowded, but you can still see when the person or child is smiling, there's a good amount of gum tissue that shows compared to the teeth. If you go back where we started and we looked at some of the other smiles, the teeth took up a greater proportion of what we were looking at. And sometimes those gummy smiles can be related to something called an overbite. So in this case, the top teeth are completely covering the bottom teeth. And you may notice it as a gummy smile in this child that has their finger in their mouth. Otherwise, here it's an intraoral image, so you can't really see it as gummy smile, but you can still see for demonstration purposes that those bottom teeth are almost invisible because the top teeth completely overlap them. And so that's actually not what we want. We want to have a good balance, kind of a Goldilocks situation. We don't want them all the way covered. We don't want them kind of edge to edge, which we'll look at in a moment. We want them somewhere in the middle. And this is sort of the reverse of that first situation. This is an underbite, kind of reminiscent of what you would see with a bulldog, where the top teeth are behind the lower teeth. So that's another thing we want to be looking for. And if you see that, we definitely want to jump in. For me, that one's not as much of a symptom-based evaluation. If you see something like this, it needs to be corrected in the moment in which we see it. The sooner, the better. I was referring to that Goldilocks moment. This is that sort of in between. So we don't want the front teeth all the way over the bottom teeth. We don't want the opposite to be true, where they're in sort of an edge-to-edge position like this. That tooth sits exactly right up against the edge of the bottom tooth. That's another sign that growth may be off track. Sometimes we want to be looking at, like, is the tongue waving at us? So I know that sounds like a little more of a subtlety, but you can kind of see in this photo where this girl's tongue on the side is sort of pushing through. And sometimes when we see spacing between the teeth like we do here, it can be a sign that that tongue is having a habit of sort of pushing each time that someone swallows. It's a dysfunctional habit. The tongue shouldn't be kind of pushing its way out of the mouth like that. So another thing to be keeping an eye out for. I did find this little stock video where this boy, his tongue is pushing through, and you can just see, oh, it froze. So when he's speaking, you don't want to see the tongue in that way. And another thing we're looking at, it isn't just the teeth. So I know the purpose of this video is teeth, but sometimes we want to pay attention to what the lips are doing. Are the lips open all the time? That might be a sign that we're doing some mouth breathing, and we definitely don't want to default to a mouth breathing habit if we can avoid it. So sometimes it's more obvious as like truly the mouth is hanging open. Other times it's a little more subtle. You might just notice chapped lips. So see if you can catch your child and see what they're doing when you look at them. Other times the mouth might be open in this kind of arrangement. So I included here 2 photos where really the bottom lip's almost getting stuck. So this would be a pretty good warning sign that we might have what's called like an overjet, where the top teeth sit a pretty good amount forward of the bottom teeth. So this would just be a clue to look for. If you notice that the lips ever getting caught in there when your child is in a resting position, that's not what we want either. We do want kind of this relaxed position of the lips. Is going to be an example of some cross bites. So I want you to try and test yourself to see. A cross bite is sometimes multiple teeth, but sometimes just a single tooth that's in cross bite, and that's where the top tooth is behind the bottom tooth. That's not how things should be. Ideally, our top tooth should be sitting just outside of the bottom tooth. So if you want to play the game, you can pause now. Okay, we're back. Here are the answers. Did you get them right? All right, and then these are some other examples just to sort of try and quiz yourself to see what you can see from what we've talked about. We do have some gummy smiles. We've got some absence of spacing, maybe some underbites. When I had showed those sort of textbook perfect photos of teeth, the palate that was there is something to look at and appreciate, that the palate is really broad and flat. And so a lot of times what we see more commonly today is this sort of like thumbprint or high arched palate. And that is another sign that growth may be off track. And ideally, that area is sort of flat because the tongue is going to be resting up there and helping to shape that area. And if the tongue is in a low position, if we had a thumb sucking habit, there can be a variety of reasons why this forms like this. But this is a sign that perhaps something's off. And dental expanders, a lot of times, can help correct that. Also, working on function with myofunctional therapy can help correct that. So, that's another clue to be looking out for. You notice that in order for a child to close, they really have to strain their lips to close. So, I did include kind of both examples because sometimes the muscle tone or activation of it is sort of something that we're looking for. So not just the fact whether it's open or closed. We could argue that this boy on the left, that his mouth is closed at rest, but you can kind of see how he's working really hard to get his lips closed. So just more examples of that to be looking out for. This I took from a journal article. These are some cases from the author of the book Jaws. So these are some cases to show you kind of some of the things that we just talked about. There's some overactivation of the lips. There's kind of some clues on the facial profile. This little girl on the side has no space between her baby teeth initially. And these children were treated with a combination of some appliances and some therapy. And you can see how non-surgically they were able to improve their growth pattern and really have a more healthy growth, that we know they're just going to live a more healthy life because of that. Unfortunately, sometimes it's not caught early, and that's just the reality. So sometimes surgical intervention is needed. This was a textbook photo of a girl who we would say has kind of a convex profile. I included another guy here just for kind of reference of that. And she had to undergo surgery in order to correct this. So that is kind of the reality that we're looking at for some families, some children. If they don't get treatment early, it's just something to know that the surgery can be absolutely amazing and super helpful, but sometimes that is what we have to rely on. Our surgical example of how this was corrected. This girl probably had some jaw pain, some other things going on that warranted doing the surgery. So again, surgery can be super helpful, but I'm a big fan of if we can catch these things early, then we can avoid surgery. And this is just another example of kind of a more concave profile. And that's all we're going to talk about today. I don't know. This goofy dog called to me, and there are now dogs barking outside. So hopefully, this is something that you can smile about and go check your kids' teeth. Thank you.